Hey there, happy Wednesday to you. I've got a full day of studio work, but before I do that, I want to talk about something. And you are going to fall into one of two categories. Either this will make sense to you or it will fly right over your head. And it has nothing to do with intelligence or anything like that. It just has to do with really whether you're emotionally ready to hear what I'm going to say. Now, that sounds dramatic, and in some ways it is. Let me take you back. Remember when American Idol was new and it was this, maybe season 2 or 3 when, okay, we'd had I think Kelly Clarkson was the first big one and she went on to be a star, and there was the Carrie Underwood. And so it was people were starting to realize, hey, this is a legit way to get exposure as an artist. And so the auditions were flooded with hundreds and thousands of people auditioning, singers auditioning. And this thing happened, right? And we all remember it, where these really, really bad musicians would come through. Some of them, I'm pretty sure, were just there for the attention and knew they weren't good musicians, but some seemed genuinely convinced that they were a gift, God's gift to the earth, with the voice of an angel. And they would sing, and it would just be uh, like objectively awful, right? There wasn't that it's just not my taste. It would just be bad. They would not be able to sing on pitch. Their vocal tone would be shaky and warbly, and just in general not good. And there would be, and the judges, they played it well in the sense of it got a lot of ratings and things like that. But they would say things like "wow" after they got done, and then the singer would get all like, you'd see this look on their face, oh, they loved it, and they would follow up the "wow" with "you're horrible," and you could see it was as if those words weren't registering with the singer. They didn't even have a box to put that thought in. They were so convinced that they were an amazing singer, and so for one thing, it's hard to understand how you could be so oblivious to the fact that you just aren't a good singer. I'm not judging that person, just like I'm not, I was never a good baseball player, right? I just couldn't hit the ball. It just wasn't in the cards for me. More practice would have helped, but I wasn't just right out of the gate really gifted in that area. And this would be as if I go to an audition, or go to a walk-on tryout with the Braves or something, and then they said, "You're awful. What are you doing here?" And me being shocked. That's the equivalent, right? Completely unaware that they just aren't very good. And so, what does that have to do with mixing and audio? Well, obviously, it has a lot to do with it. But especially specifically today, I'm working on a mix. This is the one I showed you a little clip of this yesterday. And I've got to finish the mix today. It's the last day of the month. Of course, I waited till the last day of the month to finish my mix. 4 dueling mixes for next month. And so I'm sitting here for the last 15 minutes or so. I've been sitting here listening, making some EQ tweaks, listening to the overall tone. I've muted the vocal just so I can hear the instrumental because it's so beautiful. But also, I want to make sure I can hear everything. There are a good number of tracks in here that, are really well done and really cool parts. I want to make sure I don't hide any of those and that I'm doing the work to make sure I hear everything because it adds to the overall. Anyway, so I've been listening and playing around with things, and I feel like I'm pretty close, to be honest. I'll give it a few more listens and probably do some more tweaks and maybe a little bit of automation, but I'm feeling like I'm very close. And what hits me this morning as I'm sitting here working on this mix is that if you were to hire me to mix a song for you, and I was working on a client mix yesterday, I'm mastering for somebody later today. If you were to hire me, what would be your reason for hiring me? Just think about it. Let's say you've never hired out someone to mix your stuff before, and let's say you're hiring me, okay? And you think through, okay, you're going to get the song done, you're going to export the tracks, you're going to send the tracks to me, and I'm going to bring them in and mix them. Why would you make that decision? So think about, shelling out a couple $100 to have me mix something. So there's real money involved. You're taking a risk, right? Financial risk to hire me to do something and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. Why would you do that? Why would you take that chance on someone like me? Well, hopefully you trust me. And then secondly, you trust my ability to get a good mix. Now, that's what I want to hone in on. Are you trusting in my technique, or is there something else? Are you trusting that I know all the fun ways to use an EQ, all the cool tricks to do with a compressor, all the ways to set up a delay to make it sound cool? Is that really what you're buying into, or what you're literally buying? I would propose no. I would propose those are important, but those are far, far secondary to what you're really buying. And what you're really buying are these, right? These big floppy ears on the side of my head. You're buying this. You're buying my brain. You're buying my experience. You're buying the fact that when I listen to your mix, I will hear what's coming out of the speakers, but I'll also hear in my head how it could sound. And then I'll go to work making that happen. So if you're a big fan of tutorials, if you're a big fan of listening to my podcast and the Simply Recording podcast and the Recording Revolution and Audio Issues and the Recording Studio Rockstars and Home Recording Weekly and all these great things, all the stuff David Glenn's doing in the Pro Audio Files, there are infinite resources available for you. And they're great, and they need to be there. And of course, like, I put them out. I want you to watch my videos and get a lot out of them. But when I show you a video of, just yesterday or 2 days ago, I put a video up about how to EQ for clarity and a couple of EQ moves to get a piano to stick out above the drums and the bass without having to just turn it up. That's a useful tip, right? It's a useful trick. You can hopefully see that EQ curve, file that away, and maybe apply that on a piano track one day. And so I've helped check off one little box of one little tip that might help you in a future mix. But that's not, on its own, it's not all that helpful if you don't pair it with the ears and the knowledge to know and the experience to hear something and to know when to use that technique. So if I were to, pour all my brains out, it's so disgusting, and list out every single technique that I know, it would be probably an impressive list because I've been doing it for a long time, but knowing all those techniques isn't what makes me good at what I do. Just like knowing all the chords on the guitar, every major, minor, diminished, all the chords that you could possibly play on the guitar, knowing them doesn't mean much of anything, right? If you were auditioning for a guitar player for your band and they came in and said, hey, I can get my guitar out and play for you if you want, but you should know that I know all the chords. That's ridiculous, right? You wouldn't hire them based on that. You would hire them based on what they're able to do with that knowledge. So please continue to learn the different techniques. I mean, I learn things all the time. I'll watch a Graham Cochran video and he'll do something a way that I've never done before. And I'll think that's really cool. And then next time I'm in a situation where that technique makes sense, hopefully my brain will recall that and I'll use it and it'll be cool. But the big key, the big variable that so many of you want to skip over and ignore is that you have to know when to use that technique. You have to know what it is you're trying to accomplish sonically so that you can then choose from the 8 different techniques that might get you there, okay? When I get questions, and I get them all the time, almost every day, there's a question either in a comment or in an email or on Facebook or Twitter that says, what's the best vocal, or what's your vocal chain, or what's the best way to EQ a vocal? And I'm really trying to answer them in a kind and helpful way, but also say, hey, there's no answer to your question. I can show you my EQ for the vocal I'm doing. I'll do it right now. The vocal I've got right now in this mix, this is the vocal EQ. Okay? That I can tell you that's pretty similar to ways I've EQ'd vocals in the past, but never have I EQ'd a vocal this exact way. Why? Because I chose all of these boosts and cuts based on what I heard coming out of the speakers, based on what his voice sounds like, on what his voice sounds like recorded, on the characteristics that the compressor is doing, because I have compressor and a de-esser earlier in the chain, and they're changing the sound. And so I'm EQing based on what I'm hearing there, which is based on what I want to hear, what I want the final vocal sound to sound like. You can't do that if you can't answer that question of what do I want it to sound like, then you could use every technique in the book and not get anywhere. You've got to know what you're trying to do before you can do it. Now, is that always the case? Sometimes no. Sometimes you just try stuff and happy accidents happen and you put a random combination of plugins on a track and it sounds really cool. But I would argue that that's the minority of the time. Most of the time, you hear something and you say, hopefully you can say, I don't like the way that sounds, which means somewhere in your brain, you know how you want it to sound. And the goal is to try to get there. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's not possible, given that the way the track sounds, sometimes it's not possible. I've had people send me their recordings and then send me a reference song of a pop artist and say, I want it to sound like this. And in my mind, I listen and say, there's no way they're going to sound the same because they don't sound the same. The recording, the tracks themselves don't sound like these over here that you sent me. So I'm going to do my best to make it sound as good as it can, but you can't send me something you recorded on your phone with the little built-in speaker or microphone and then tell me to make it sound like a Grammy-winning symphony recording, right? That's not something you can do in mixing, and we talked about that a lot. So, am I rambling a little bit today? Yes, I am. I'm just kind of excited because I want to get this point across, and if I can help one of you, just one person, get this, this video will have been worth it. But the idea here is just like the singer who thinks they know, who thinks they're a good singer, and then they suddenly realize they're not. You need to realize what you can and can't do in mixing. You need to realize that techniques are just tiny, somewhat important tools to get you to the point that you can create the sounds that you want to create in your head. Ultimately, what I think is a good drum sound is irrelevant to you. You may agree with me, you may disagree with me. That doesn't matter, but you need to know what you're trying to do. Stop throwing techniques on top of something to make something happen in hopes that it sounds good. Because if you don't know what sounds good or you don't have any idea of what sound you're trying to achieve, it can be pretty pointless and it can be pretty frustrating. So I'm trying to save you some frustration and hopefully save you some time so that you start with tracks that sound good to you to begin with, songs that sound good to you to begin with, and then use all the techniques I've taught you over the years to achieve the sounds that you want to hear. Don't do what you think I would do. Do what you think the song needs. You need to take some ownership of this. You are not a passive player in this. You are a member of the band. You are playing the mixer. You are playing the mixing screen. You are playing the EQs and the compressors. You're arguably the most important person in the band. So play it. Play it with passion. Yes, you can draw ideas from other artists. Yes, I play lots of different riffs and things from other artists that I've heard, but I've combined them all into something that's uniquely me. I'm not trying to be Foo Fighters or Switchfoot or David Wilcox or insert Jimi Hendrix. I'm not trying to be any of them, but I do things. I've borrowed little techniques from them, but I haven't borrowed it to say now this will sound like a David Wilcox song, because it doesn't. Even if I wanted it to, it wouldn't. It sounds like a Joe Gilder song where I borrowed that one riff or that one like concept of a riff and I made it my own. That's what this is all about. So if you tend to think of mixing as a technical thing, as a very precise thing, as a left brain thing, I want to challenge you to think of it more, flip that around. Mixing is absolutely a creative process. You are playing an instrument just as much as if I grabbed a guitar over there and started playing. Except this instrument is a lot more complex, right? In some ways. So that's what I got for you today. Try to develop a little bit of self-awareness into what you're doing and what you're able to do. And remember that the goal isn't to learn all the techniques, it's to develop these and develop this and to get the experience to know what it is you want to accomplish. Because actually accomplishing it, that's kind of the easy part. Knowing what you want to accomplish, that's the scary and hard part. And that's what I want you to lean into.